Look at this photograph of a classic New York street corner. Notice the heavy neon sign for Have a Pizza hanging over the large window displays. This represents a very specific, distinctly American slice culture. If you go to Naples, Italy, a traditional pizza is delicate. It features a paper-thin crust and just a sparse scattering of fresh mozzarella and basil. But an American, Buffalo or New York-style pie is an entirely different beast. It is a heavy object, loaded with dense layers of cheese, thick pepperoni, and whatever else you can throw at it. This is the exact problem most home cooks run into. They read a popular internet recipe, buy some fancy imported 00 flour, and try to build a heavy pie. Under all that weight, the delicate dough completely collapses, tearing apart and turning into a soggy, floppy mess. To pull off a genuine, heavy-duty buffalo slice, you have to throw out the traditional Italian culinary rules. You have to approach the recipe as a structural engineering problem. A thick buffalo-style pizza has to function as a load-bearing surface. Building one requires a masterclass in high-tensile gluten, precise water ratios, and strict manipulation of the environment it rises in. The failure of most home recipes starts with the flour. 00 flour is mathematically formulated to cook in 90 seconds at 900 degrees, supporting almost zero mass. It is far too fragile for a heavy slice. Instead, you need a specialized foundation. For this specific build, the optimal choice is a commercial ingredient called All Trump's high gluten flour. Flour contains microscopic proteins that link into a gluten network. With high gluten flour, those strands stretch and tighten into a dense interlocking mesh under stress. This woven grid acts as a physical barrier, allowing you to stack heavy cheese and meat without breaking the crust. In construction terms, this high gluten flour is your rebar. Without that tight protein foundation, any pizza carrying serious weight is doomed to fail before a single drop of water is even added. But a high tensile flour needs exact amounts of water to activate. Pour in too little, and the proteins won't bond. Pour in too much, and the structure loses its rigidity. This chart shows the hydration spectrum, from 65 to 100%. Combining 34 ounces of water with 50 ounces of flour hits a 68% sweet spot. Here, internal moisture generates steam during baking, ensuring a chewy crumb, not a rigid cracker. If you push the hydration past 85%, as some modern bakers try to do, that structure breaks down completely. The dough crosses a threshold and turns into an extremely sticky fluid that cannot hold a sturdy shape. Dialing in that precise 68% ratio is essentially curing concrete. It perfectly locks the necessary moisture inside while guaranteeing the crust has the exterior load-bearing strength to support the toppings. Once the flour and water are combined, the dough requires mechanical mixing, followed by a strict 20-minute resting period untouched in the bowl. This pause forces the gluten development phase to jumpstart. Then comes the biological curing phase. The dough is rolled into one massive bulk ball and placed into a refrigerator for a cold ferment lasting 1 to 3 days. This drubs the temperature, allowing the tense gluten strands to relax, while complex flavors slowly multiply. But your geographic location can actively threaten this process. If you live at high altitude, the lowered atmospheric pressure drastically accelerates yeast activity. The dough will expand too quickly, overproof, and eventually collapse entirely. To counter this lack of pressure, you have to intentionally restrict the yeast. Dropping the active yeast down to an incredibly low 4 grams artificially slows the rise, keeping the structure stable. Controlling the cold ferment and limiting the yeast at altitude proves that baking requires active environmental manipulation to protect the exact architecture you've built. You can perfectly engineer a load-bearing dough, balance the hydration, and carefully control the rise. But all of that preparation ends in total failure if it goes into an oven running at the wrong temperature. Heavy pizzas require a specific thermal loading phase. You have to push your pizza oven to its absolute maximum limit, often around 950 degrees, for a full hour. This stores a massive amount of thermal energy deep inside the baking stone. The second the pizza slides onto that stone, you must execute a sudden drop in temperature. You immediately cut the flame to its absolute lowest setting, dropping the ambient air down to a baking sweet spot of roughly 700 degrees. That thermal gradient serves a specific physical purpose. The trapped heat inside the stone rapidly sears the thick undercarriage, while the lowered ambient flame prevents the exterior crust from burning to ash before the thick center has time to finish baking. The resulting pie has a distinctly crispy exterior and a soft, chewy interior. It possesses the sheer physical strength to easily carry a mountain of toppings without sagging or tearing. There is no universally perfect pizza dough. The optimal recipe is simply a mathematically precise equation, specifically reverse-engineered to hold the exact pie you intend to build.